19 minutes past 8, and on a daily basis our lives are in their hands. The country's top hospital doctors work hard to keep the NHS going, but Inside Out has been given exclusive figures which show one doctor every 3 weeks takes their own life. That's 141 in the past 8 years. So who cares for the consultants? Who's looking after our doctors? At a time when demand is at an unprecedented level, Nikki Fox finds out just how great the pressure is on those at the top.
As a consultant in one of the busiest departments in Ipswich Hospital, Dr. James Bailey has one of the most stressful jobs. With limited time, the decisions he makes can change lives. He invited me to spend time on a shift with him on the emergency assessment unit to show just how intensive the work is.
Mr. Hi, hello.
Yes, sir.
I'm Dr. Bailey,
yes, sir.
One of the consultants.
Yes, sir.
My young colleague here was just telling me about your troubles that brought you to hospital.
Yes.
How are you feeling now as compared to last night?
We often hear about the stress that new doctors are under, but consultants who've been working in the NHS for years are also dealing with anxiety and being overworked. Exclusive figures released by the Office for National Statistics say last year 18 doctors took their own lives. In the past 8 years, the figure's 141.
It's the fairly relentless decision making and moving from one patient with one problem to another patient with completely unrelated problems, and having to make that switch time after time after time, I think is the hardest aspect.
Last month, they recorded their busiest ever day in A&E. For Dr. Bailey, his way of dealing with stress is to talk to other senior staff, and that works for him. But he thinks the culture needs to change.
I think it's not something that's particularly been perhaps high profile enough, and I think there is sometimes the expectation, or people at least feel the expectation, that you should work through it and get your head down, knuckle down and keep going. But I think knowing that it's a stressful job is well known. I think just accepting that and knowing that you shouldn't just have to just get on with it, and that there are places you can turn to support is important.
But for others, the support just isn't there. One of the victims of the so-called get-on-with-it culture was Dr. Jagdeep Sidhu. A leading heart consultant, he featured on this BBC film pioneering new ways of working.
He always wanted to help people. He was a very, very humble person, and he'd never say what he did. He just said, I work in a hospital.
But last November, after kissing his family goodbye, he emailed his brother Amandeep to tell him he was in the car at the top of a cliff. That was the last contact his brother had. The hospital commissioned this independent report into your brother's death, and two of the main factors they mention were an excessive workload and the fact the NHS was resource constrained. What did you think when you saw that?
So he was effectively doing the role of two consultants, full-time consultants, so he would be seeing a lot more patients than was probably expected. My brother felt he couldn't put his hand up and say, I need help, because he felt that he would be seen as weak. He said there just simply aren't enough resources for the number of patients, and that needs to be looked at. And I think that responsibility lies outside of the healthcare system, really amongst politicians and really sort of the payers, etc. Sadly, you know, he's part of a cohort of many, will facilitate and drive that change.
Back on the wards, Dr. Bailey's on his 15th patient. Do you understand how other doctors could have mental health problems?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been well publicised, certainly recently, in terms of several high-profile cases where doctors have taken their own lives, which has been attributed, at least in part, to the workload that they've been under. I think people just knowing that you can talk to people about what you're going through, because you're not the only one going through that. There are lots of other people going through similar things, and having those relationships and those connections is really key.
Nikki Fox reporting. You can see more on tonight's Inside Out, 7:30 on BBC One. We're listening to that. With me now, Dr. Lucy Henshall from Tunstall. Lucy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Mark.
We talk a lot about the pressures on NHS staff. We don't often talk about the pressure on consultants, which clearly is very high.
Well, I think the truth is the pressure is on all medics and all NHS staff, but certainly the consultants at the top of the tree within the hospital environment have a whole team beneath them and enormous responsibilities, many of which they're not hands-on with in the moment. So as well as those decisions that James Bailey's outlined so well, on the fly, on the hoof, constant, relentless, there's also all of the other stuff that goes on unseen, all of the follow-up of results and of clinics and of managing. But actually they're losing some of their autonomy. The pressures are such that there just aren't enough resources. It's a very, very toxic climate in which you are desperately trying to do the very best for each and every patient, but almost trying to do an impossible job. And that's where the cultural and the resource issues are really damaging doctors' health. And there is evidence that doctors' mental health is worsening, and worsening mental health leads to a higher suicide risk.
Yeah, it certainly does. So they are at the very top of that tree, aren't they? And a lot of people are looking to them for those decisions.
Yeah, and they don't have enough of each other. So if, like dominoes, if one goes, the pressure's double on the chap next door. So there is a stigma still. There's a huge stigma amongst medics about mental health, that fear of being judged as weak or of failing. There's a fear of sanctions. There's letting down your colleagues. All of these issues keep people at work rather than asking for help. And that's something that we desperately need to change. Is it's okay to ask for help as a doctor, just as it is for any other member of the public, because we're exactly the same.
So there's not enough peer support there, because they are literally, as you say, right at the very top of the tree. So, you know, they are in many cases on their own making these final decisions. But surely the local trusts that they work for have a duty of care here.
Thank you. I agree. Yes. There is a duty of care towards the staff in any organisation. The reality is it's very difficult to provide that with inadequate resources, because the work has to get done. And a lot of the issue is lack of time as well, that people don't have time to get together for that peer support. They pass in the corridor, they're flying around. But yes, I think there is an organisational duty in every hospital, but there's also an issue higher up the chain, and I think James put his finger on the button very neatly there. There is an issue with respecting and resourcing the NHS adequately so that the work can be done safely for the doctors as well as safely for the patients, because they're interlinked.
We've heard a lot about nurse pressure, for instance, very recently, and now consultants. We've done a lot about the pressures on junior doctors. So right through the whole of the NHS, then there is too much pressure, you would say, on people. I mean, it's a tough job. They know what it's like when they go into it.
You know what it's like when you go into it, but that doesn't make it right. And actually, I think most people don't know what it's like when they go into it, because it's by the time you get to being qualified and working, you're 10 years down the road, as a GP or as a consultant. The world has moved on, and look at what's happened in the NHS in the last 10 years. Patients can see the difference. Doctors are inside that, working, trying to do their level best to provide care for their patients. And it's draining them. It's absolutely draining them. So they're very, very vulnerable.
Lucy, thank you very much for your time today. That's Dr. Lucy Henshall joining us from a home in Tunstall. And if you want to find out more, BBC One tonight, 7:30 on Inside Out. There's a whole feature on this particular